There we go.
All right. Thank you for joining me once again. Always wonderful to have you.
Of course.
hmm So, uh, would you like to would you like to share what made this topic come to mind for you?
Oh, yeah. So for those who don't know, Nicole and I met in a divorced, I'm going to specifically say parents, but we'll call it just a divorce group on Facebook. And one of the biggest things that I continue to see, even after years of being in the group, is this toxic banter back and forth about women doing this or men doing that. And that's one of the things that really hasn't seemed to evolve much in the conversation about relationship dynamics. There's always something to, spat about. And I've seen a lot of other content creators talking about how difficult it is to find a healthy relationship after toxic ones because we have patterns that we fall into that every human does. And I think eventually we become blind to how toxic or negative not only the behavior can be, but how it can affect our partners and change the way people view us and how we view ourselves. So, yeah, that's kind of the starter to it. You're welcome to share any of your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just this thing is not this setup is not
Cooperating.
working as well as I had hoped. There we go. Yeah, I agree. I stopped paying much attention to that group because there was so much toxicity in it. And I mean, I met some great people in it, but overall, just it's getting old. The toxicity is getting old. And I get that in a lot of cases we don't, believe things literally and that it's joking and poking fun or just venting at the silly things that can get on our nerves in a relationship. And that can be harmless. But I think in this climate where so many people actually believe those things, I've even stopped making jokes like that because like not everyone's going to understand the lighthearted way I mean it. Right? Like you and I bust each other's chops all the time and we understand that it's humorous and that none of it's real and not everyone sees it that way. And so yeah, I agree. It's been getting toxic and I think that in this climate where we have this war of the sexes on media, I think it's more important than ever for our little voices to say what we believe to be true and to speak out against it. And so I make sure that I'm saying how much I appreciate men and how wonderful men are. And yeah, women are great too, and I appreciate women, but I make sure to explicitly say it. And I think that it's so important to check our own expectations after we've been burned by a toxic relationship because our expectations affect the way we behave and the decisions we make, and that affects who we attract. And if we're putting toxicity out there, then that's what we're going to get back. And toxicity doesn't always mean that you're hurting the other person intentionally or that you're being a horrible, immoral person. Sometimes just the belief that nobody will treat me right. That belief projected onto others, even if it's not coming from a place of hating others, it could be coming from a place of low self worth. But that belief puts enough toxicity into the interaction that the other person, it'll change the way the other person responds to us. And so it's so important if you want to attract a healthy relationship to be really aware of your own deep down borderline subconscious beliefs and expectations, and if they're not helpful, to take steps to challenge them and change them until you can get to a place where saying there are so many great men out there are so many wonderful women out there isn't some cheesy affirmation, but it's something that you genuinely believe.
Yeah, for sure. I think you touched on a lot of really important points because, like for myself, soon after my separation, um, I I felt like at that point that I was in a pretty decent mental space, and reflecting on it is comical at this point because while I certainly wasn't like, let's say, a terrible husband, I wasn't abusive in I guess like the typical sense that a lot of people think of, but more so in ways like um, not showing appropriate levels of gratitude for things that my partner did, or the fact that things were getting done even if they weren't specifically the way I would prefer them done, or what else? Just not communicating things with compassion. You know, when you come home frustrated or stressed or something along those lines and you go right into a conversation, um, you know, for me, one of the biggest issues is like I have a perfectionist streak in me, and so coming home and not seeing what I would have preferred when I got home, it's like, oh, or whatever, and it just adds to an unhealthy environment.
Mm-hmm.
And not recognizing that in the moment was certainly damaging to my marriage, and would have been damaging to any relationship that I tried to start afterwards had I not checked myself and talked to enough people and recognized when I was falling into that pattern and what I needed to do to kind of come out of it. And I think our early on communication helped me a lot with understanding not only that wonderful people do exist. I always had an idea, like I wasn't closed off to the idea that wonderful women were out there. I just hadn't met one that lit me up like you do. And um and so from that, being able to appreciate you and see how you see things in the world, i I think that on some level um I had the mindset that, like, maybe people like you exist that are sort of idealist and look at everything through rose colored glasses, but there's a level of like expected naivety, I guess, from my family or my background, and like people aren't that bubbly and wonderful, but they absolutely can be. But one of the things that you're not going to find is those people around a toxic person. So if you constantly view the world in a negative light and you're always talking badly about someone's behavior or the way something happened, or criticizing anything and everything that you see, those people are not going to be in your circle for good reason, because that's not who they associate with. And that's a big part of being able to find the healthy relationships that you want. If you are a cynical person and you're consistently putting people down or putting things down or talking negatively about things in general, the people that have that positive mindset are going to avoid you. And in that case, I mean, we're avoiding me because I have had those tendencies in the past, and I still do on some level. I'm really trying hard to give myself the time to reframe moments as I notice them when I'm going, "Ugh, this happened again," and being like, "Okay, that was not good. What do I need to change about this? How do I need to reprocess what I just saw or what I just experienced so that I don't have that reaction on a regular basis?" And that's been a game changer, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd really like to dig deeper into that because it's an important point. So I think first of all, what you mentioned earlier is so great because it's like, how dare our partners and the universe not conform to the vision we had in our head of how things were supposed to unfold when we never communicated it to anybody. And like, it's funny, but how often do we do that? Because we project like this would be the best way for it to happen. And then if all the other 8 billion people on the planet, is that what we're up to now? Like however many, 20 billion, who knows? But if they don't if they don't conform to that vision of like, this is how the universe was supposed to unfold. I envisioned it in my head. What is it now? I'm going to be angry that everyone else wasn't in on this vision that I had in my head, and that the universe made something different happen because that's not how it was supposed to happen. Now I'm going to be frustrated, I'm going to be really anxious, and I'm going to have a really bad freaking day. And I'm going to take it out on my partner and correct them because they were obviously wrong in whatever they envisioned in their head. So I'm going to make sure they know that. it's like it's like when you put it that way, it's ridiculous. And yet all of us have fallen into that at some point. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like you mentioned, you catch yourself, like what's going on in those moments? You know, like what exactly are you catching?
I mean, a majority of the time, I would say that at those moments, I am experiencing some level of stress, whether I'm behind schedule or something unexpected happened that I wasn't prepared for, and now I'm kind of scrambling to recover from it. It happened, I don't know how many times with the trailer while I was working on it. You've heard me rant on repeat about all the different things that were happening with that. It was just like you were kind of giggling at me for the most part through a good portion of it because you're like, yep, that's what's going to happen. And I'm like, just why can't the walls be straight? Or why can't the this? People can't frame right, and then they can't do this right, and then now, like, I mean, but it's in that reality, it's a moment where, like, I understand no single piece of wood is ever perfectly straight. No nail is going to go into the wood at the exact right angle to be perfect every time. And like, so there's all this imperfection built into it, and people do their best to make it look pretty after the fact. But the reality of it is construction is a controlled disaster. And because of that, going back in and repairing a place, like I don't know how many people have seen the pictures of before what it looked like, but it was a complete and utter disaster. Holes in the floor, just awfulness. Going back through it and repairing it the right way was a very difficult process, very time consuming, very frustrating. And so for 17 months or so, close to that, I was in this sort of perpetual state of, okay, things are going really great and making progress and everything else, and then something happens and it's like, oh my god.
Mm. So
And it
God,
would throw me into
in a
this.
complicated project that takes a year to complete, everything didn't go exactly as you wanted it to. Craziness.
Yep. Why couldn't the builders in 1981 use their heads and not rush through whatever? I don't know, just lots of things. And I mean, you got the brunt of my ranting about it. Um,
Yeah.
but between that and in the moments where the boys were watching a movie or couldn't decide on a movie or were fighting about what game they were going to play or screaming at each other because the sky was green or like whatever, it's like they find something to have a problem about, and then you're diverting your attention from one thing to another. I mean, it happens to everybody every day, but they definitely get more impactful when you have a timeline that you're working on and you're leveraging personal credit to try to make these repairs. And you have an envisioned timeline that you're just missing every single time you walk in the door. Oh, we just lost a week. Um, so a good portion of it is stress induced, and then looking for the best solution while trying to balance what my kids are going to experience and how hard it's going to be for me and how much money it may cost and like all those other things. But you're processing it so quickly, or trying to go through that process so quickly, that being diverted from that is an annoyance. And so you get at least for me, get these little spikes of whatever, and it's just like then you start, you know, I wouldn't say judging, I don't know if that's the best word, but like the kids are fighting over someone not sharing popcorn, and meanwhile I'm managing $100,000 project. I've got to drive 4 hours each way to go get there. I've got to coordinate a plumber and the flooring person and this and 17 other things, and all they want to do is fight about the popcorn. So
How dare kids not understand the scope of reality?
at 12, 10, and 6, like, damn it, children, grow up.
Exactly.
But wait, don't do that because clothes are expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's one thing we do in our dating life too. We have our vision of what the perfect date will be and how it's supposed to end in some cases. And then our partner has a different idea. And what's wrong with them? They're, clearly wrong because it doesn't conform with my idea. So it's if you wanted dinner and they ask for coffee, well then they're cheap, they're not willing to put in the effort and all this other stuff. But if you wanted coffee and they ask for dinner, it's like, what are they trying to rope me into? I just want to like meet them quickly for coffee. I hate when they expect so much of my time right at the beginning. So it's like you just there's no way to win this. And so I think one of the easiest ways to open ourselves up to love is to be open to possibilities. You know? Like if someone wants to, obviously I'm not dating anymore. Like yeah, I have you. I'm not interested in anyone else. But when I was dating, if someone wanted to, oh, hey Leslie, thanks for joining. If somebody wanted to go for a walk in the city. Awesome. Somebody wanted to, you know, have a full on dinner date. Awesome. Somebody wanted to, like, there was somebody who wanted to take me to Miami relatively early on. And I was like, let me check some safety things first. Like, let me make sure that the situation felt safe to me. And then once it did, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. So I think like being open and not judging and seeing how it feels. I think, we can tell if somebody is putting in low effort or if they just preferred a simpler first date, like when you meet them. And so being open and not projecting our ideas onto someone else, I think, is a great way to start. And then, of course, that leads right into the freaking checklists. I think the first date is not, are you my husband? Like, no. I feel like that's one of the biggest ways I see women specifically tend to stress themselves out, because on the first date, it's like, I get it. You want a husband. I wanted a husband, right? I still want a husband. I hope you're going to be my husband. That's what we're on track for, but on a first date, it didn't even make sense to think about that. It would be like, I don't know, it's like going someplace for the first time for 30 minutes and being like, am I going to move here? That's like you you go a couple, you stay for a week, come back, like the after like a bunch of exposure, then I think it makes sense to start thinking, huh, I wonder if it makes sense for this to progress. But the first several dates, it's like the first date is literally you go with the intention of having fun, right? This is a person, maybe they're awesome only as a friend, maybe they're awesome as a husband, maybe they're not awesome.
Well,
Like,
so hold on. To be clear, maybe they're not awesome for you. Maybe it's not a good
so
fit,
I don't want to
but they could be a
gaslight.
really wonderful person. But there are some really not wonderful people out there in general.
Yes, exactly. Like, I don't want to gaslight. On a first date, you can run into people who,
They
the
don't
people,
put their
yeah,
best foot forward, or
no, who are
their
downright
demons come out
dangerous.
immediately.
You can run
Yeah,
into people who are downright dangerous. Like, I don't want to um sugarcoat it or gaslight the people who have those experiences. I've definitely run into people, and thankfully, I feel pretty comfortable holding my own. But I've run into people where things, I had to put a stop to things because they were going in a dangerous direction. There's people who did not respect boundaries, and catch that early on with the little things. That's very important. But people who did not respect boundaries, who tried to force things after I said no, like that happens. Um, I don't let it ruin my day. I just move on. But yeah, so most of the time you have a lovely person and you get to hang out, go do something fun with this lovely person. And occasionally you have someone who's awful, and once, twice, a few times in your life they can be dangerous, sometimes more. And then occasionally you run into the person where there's really potential. But so enjoy that first date with no pressure. Like, imagine it's just like you got sent on a work assignment or something. You're going to meet this client and you guys are going to have lunch. Just like chit chat, laugh, have a great time. And then ask yourself, do I want to see this person again? If the answer is yes, see them again. There's no harm in it. Even if there's like no chance they can be right for you, at this stage, enjoy seeing them again. And then if you are not comfortable with things progressing in a casual way, then at one point, after maybe 3 or 4 dates, when you're like, yeah, this is definitely not going in that direction, I'm not interested in seeing them again, then maybe you'd have to cut things off or be very clear, like, I don't see this moving in a relationship direction, but I really enjoy hanging out with you, and I'm open to friendship. Maybe they're open to that, maybe they're not. um you don't know. But like the first few dates, like, who cares? And even if you're looking for a husband, there's nothing wrong with being open to casual connections if that's enjoyable for you. It doesn't mean they're using you, just like you're not using them. You're enjoying a connection that's not on track to be a husband, and you're both enjoying it for what it is. For some people, that does not feel good. And that's either way, there's no right or wrong here, but just keep it fun. Have fun. It's supposed to be fun.
yeah. I think that that's too often that we have like these super preset expectations, which may or may not be reasonable for the dating pool in your area or at this time or whatever. But communicating clearly what you can as far as your expectations, whether you are open to casual or not. And granted, there's a lot of people out there who aren't uh, transparent in how they communicate that. Oh yeah, yeah, no, I want something long term. If that's the way it is, then there's a particular type of behavior that you look for and make sure that they're actually like, if there is a connection And if you both feel chemistry, and if you are creating this like container of safety and alignment where both of you want the same things in life, whether it's yes kids, no kids, or big house, small house, whether you want to live in a particular area, or what other hobbies you have, because I've gone from being a really big sports fan to almost never watching sports at all. But making sure that there's enough substance and integrity and just general alignment with communication and how you could potentially raise children if that's what you're looking for. Like all of those things should be discussed and talked about before you move into a more intimate space with them, if both of you are honest with each other about looking for long term. Does that mean that you shouldn't sleep together within a few dates or something along those lines? Not necessarily. You have to communicate, you have to share your vision for what that is, and depending on what the feedback looks like, proceed with caution, or at least an open mind as to whether or not you feel safe being able to do that. Because it's not just women that end up being in situations where they're afraid of being taken advantage of. Half of the comments that I see in the divorce group are men talking about how there's no benefit to men in getting married or anything else, and it's like there absolutely is, but the scope that these people are looking at is so far in one direction or another. They're not looking for all of the wonderful benefits that come from having an emotionally supportive partner who shares certain passions that you have and wants to build a life together because they got burned by their ex or several exes. And maybe there's codependency, maybe someone lacked significant ability to hold boundaries or communicate boundaries or something. Like, could be anything, but I think we all have to own where we're at and where we're coming from and be able to communicate what your expectations are and how you want to see things progress. If you are only looking at casual, then please be upfront with that. Don't lie about it, because you're not helping anybody in the long run other than yourself. It's a very selfish thing to do. And do people do it all the time? Absolutely. But can we try our best as a society to keep it as a minimum and just be transparent? Find the person who that actually aligns with. If you just want a casual connection, find it responsibly, respectfully, compassionately. Find what you're looking for in that moment with integrity and open, transparent communication. I don't think that it's that hard. I think that just in general, both men and women tend to look to control the situation and don't allow for the best you opportunities that can exist there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Um, and I think it's really helpful to be a safe person for people to be honest about what they truly desire. And this benefits both of you, because if you're genuinely supportive of somebody sharing a desire that is the opposite of what you want, and you can be like, oh, wow, I really hope you find that, and mean it, not judge, not think, well, I don't know what trauma you had in your childhood that made you want to, none of that stuff. If you're genuinely that kind of person, then people tend to be honest in expressing what they want and what their desires are. And then you get to know what their real desires are. And I can tell you, I've been very happy at times that people expressed what they really wanted because it did not line up at all. And sometimes we ended up, still seeing each other and having a wonderful connection that didn't progress into something serious, but we genuinely enjoyed the time we had together until circumstances changed. Like there have been people where their lifestyle, just moving all around the globe, is not compatible. Like, I want to be settled down with my child, somewhere and at a point where they're ready to have kids. I'm glad I knew that. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with them. They were wonderful people, and we knew it wasn't going to progress into what you and I have. And I cherish the memories and the time I had with them, and if we're in touch, I want them to be doing well, and I'll warmly talk to them and, hey Tanya, but and that's it. And then not everyone has to deal with it that way. For some people, they feel really violated if they get if they're intimate with people in either emotionally or physically, and that doesn't progress. And that's okay too. Those boundaries are so important to respect, and respect them yourself first of all, because no matter what other people think, you really have to know what your boundaries are and not be influenced by what society says they should be. Because on one hand, society's like, oh, empowered woman, going out, one night stands, I don't give a, what. Like that's one way we're supposed to be. And on the other hand, we're supposed to like, no, chastity, nothing until marriage. I'm so pure. And so either way you're wrong, first of all. But in any case, like we all fall somewhere on that spectrum, and knowing where that genuinely is for you is life changing. And then enforcing that boundary is life changing. And I'm going to have to repeat what I said last time. Enforcing a boundary means that things, like when you have a boundary where I am not comfortable with this unless this relationship progresses to a certain point. So, for example, I am not comfortable sleeping with someone unless it's going to be serious and exclusive. Then you don't sleep with that person until they've demonstrated with their words and actions consistently over time that they've met that standard. So that doesn't mean someone saying on the first date, yes, I'd be happy to be exclusive, because like, do you trust that person's word on a first date? Like, they haven't demonstrated it. People can say anything, and they don't even have to be lying. They could have different ideas about what that means. Maybe for them, they're like, I don't know you well enough at all to know if this is going to be serious, but I'm willing to be exclusive until I find out. Oh, you know what? At the end of the first date, I found out, but I'm really glad we slept together. Like, so it's like demonstrate consistently over time with their words and their actions. That's so important. And so if that's your standard, like, I had certain things, like I wasn't willing to be exclusive until I felt that we knew each other on a deep level, because otherwise for me the exclusivity is meaningless. It's like, hey, here's my boyfriend who I barely know. Like, it's just, what is that? Yeah, we're trying to make it work. I think he's the one. What's your middle name again? Like, it means absolutely nothing to me. And so for me, I need to get to know someone on a deep enough level to feel like, you know what, I think this person is a better match for me than virtually everyone else on the planet. And so I'm willing to cut off opportunities with everyone else and focus my energy here. And that for me takes a few months. And then when I get to that point, I'm willing to be exclusive. And I also have, boundaries and standards around like merging families, merging finances, where I need certain things to, I need our relationship to progress to a certain depth, to a certain level of not what's the word, interdependency, before I'm comfortable. And like, these are things that we've been working through, and I respect those boundaries in myself. And as we've been moving along, thankfully we've been aligned, even if not perfectly aligned enough where it's not causing conflict. And then when those things when those standards are met consistently over time, then I feel comfortable because there's no doubt. So then I'm not afraid. It's like I already see this. I've already experienced that this is how you are, that this is how the situation will be. And so therefore I can full-heartedly go into a new situation and take a new step and not be full of anxiety, right? Because anxiety then it leads to the controlling tendencies, right? Because if I'm afraid, like if I take this leap of faith, hey Asim, if I take this leap of faith and you say you're going to, that we're aligned, you say we're aligned, you say that you agree that you want to meet a certain standard or whatever, but it hasn't happened yet. Now I'm in this place that feels really vulnerable. And now if there's anything that seems like it might indicate that we're not on track, I'm going to be all anxious. And then anxiety turns into nagging or withdrawing or, those types of toxic behaviors.
Yeah, because that's the interesting thing about how all of this developed. You were very much against the idea of a long distance relationship, or not even just the idea of it, plain and simple, not open to it. And what ended up basically developing was we really enjoyed each other's company. We had an instant connection and instant chemistry, and I wanted to continue to be around you, period. Like there didn't have to be a string attached or anything else, but I genuinely felt that I was in your presence and through the experiences that we had becoming a better person, father, human, everything. And so why would I not want to continue to be around you and everything? Now granted, if in those first several months you happen to meet someone else that you did have the ability to connect with and everything that happened sooner, then you know what, I 2,000 miles away, I got all these other things, that are going to be obstacles for the long term. I would respect you and hope that we could maintain whatever, level of connection was appropriate for that situation, and, you know, be able to communicate and everything, which is one of those things that a lot of people don't understand or specifically like agree with, like communicating with people that you dated or slept with in the past. Many people have a completely no off limits kind of, you know uh view of that, and I don't think either one of us specifically have that view, because there's one, a reason that they're in the past, and two, a reason that we have chosen now after, well, after the amount of time it was before we became exclusive, that we had the connection that nobody else was going to be able to break. And it's not specifically like cause effect situation where the exclusivity comes in at that point. But in general, we loved being around each other and continued to make the effort to make sure that we were going to be around each other on a semi-regular basis. And before we knew it, it was like, she's my girlfriend. And
Exactly.
I'm I'm I think that after several months, even with, and that was the hard part, it was like I was falling for you, you were falling for me. There was no communication specifically about exclusivity or your changing of your position. It was just we acted completely naturally around each other, and what happened was we fell for each other. And then you said, okay, well, how is this going to work? And so we started figuring out a plan.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is, asking for a title or for exclusivity, like asking for it and then expecting the relationship to rise to that bar is less effective and more anxiety provoking than only being willing to label something when it has happened. You know, so when I lost interest in dating other people because I wanted to put my energy towards you, and when my understanding was that you also were not focusing on anyone else, then it was like, okay, let's make this an agreement. This is where we're at. Do you agree this is where we're at? Do you want to keep this going? Okay, now we're committed to it. And
But to be fair,
when
it was not that academic. It was very much more like
yeah,
chemistry flowing and like everything else. And it was like, so I did this, and you're like, okay, let's go.
uh, you know, being in a relationship, I'm not going to call someone my boyfriend until they feel like my boyfriend. You know, I'll be honest that yes, I feel like we have the potential to head in that direction. I'm not going to be like, no, right? That's just guarded, you know. So it's like, yeah, you know, I am open. I really wanted a relationship at that point, and you know, I'll be honest, like, yeah, I see potential, and I'm not going to call someone my boyfriend until they feel like my boyfriend. Like, if we agree that we're both interested in moving that direction, I'm not going to be like, oh, I really like this guy. Let me ask if he'll be my boyfriend, and then hope he starts acting like one.
Yeah.
Nope.
Just to just to pause for a second, Asim asked for advice for his love life
Mm,
for a better relationship with his wife. And
mm,
so I think that so we talked with him on some calls before, and I don't know that I have any like specific advice. I know there's a huge cultural difference between where we live and where he lives. So I don't know that I could give the absolute best advice because it's probably going to be significantly different than what cultural norms are there. You might have a better idea for it, but
mm,
as far as like I can share things that you and I do or like the way we communicate about things that might be of some help in just that realm, but like, things like public displays of affection, I'm pretty sure are probably not something that would be helpful to him. So let me stew
yeah.
on that
So
if you have something.
I think for me, the hardest thing with this question is not knowing exactly what your marriage is like now. So if I know what your marriage is like now, what's going really well and where there's tension or disagreements, then it's much easier to give something specific. Um, so I guess the best advice I can give is ask your wife how she thinks you can improve your love life and your relationship, and truly hear whatever she has to say, especially, I'm not saying even if, I'm saying especially if your impulse is that it's ridiculous or wrong or too much or unfair. And
Or silly or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
and so I would ask her, and then I would soak it in and really try to understand where she's coming from and why. She is
Mhm.
in anxiety. Okay, is she generally an anxious person, or does is her anxiety around your relationship?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of appreciate or understand, but because I know that there's like significant cultural differences between what's acceptable for a husband and wife in that region. But in general, I think that if one of the things that you want to do is really go into
Oh,
a rabbit
this
hole
is
or a
good.
series of rabbit holes, it's
So
shed.
this is good.
Yeah.
She's generally anxious. And so you have this amazing opportunity to be her safe place. You have this amazing opportunity to be the person who helps her feel grounded. And so it's extremely important that if she's generally anxious, you are extremely centered and grounded. So you have to have this connection to your core and this connection to peace that's unshakable. And let me know if you have practices to help you with that already. That's where I would start. You want to be the person where the sky could be falling, there could be complete chaos around, and you wrap your arms around your wife and all of that disappears. She feels like everything's going to be okay. But to be that person for her, you have to be that person inside where you know you can handle whatever the universe throws at you, where you can stay centered and at peace and manage your emotions. Let your emotions flow by without getting sucked into them. Right? That kind of strength, that makes people who are anxious feel very safe around you. And then it's really important when she's feeling anxious to validate her feeling. It doesn't mean you're agreeing that, oh my God, everything's falling apart, everything's awful, but validate her feeling. Like, I can see you're anxious. I can see this is really causing you anxiety, huh? Okay. Just help her feel understood, even if it wouldn't make you anxious, whatever the situation is. Understand she feels anxious right now. That's how she's feeling. This is how it's impacting her. And understand how you feel when you're anxious. That's how she's feeling right now. It doesn't matter if the same thing makes you anxious or not. That's how she's feeling right now. And so acknowledge, help her feel understood in her feelings and not like she's wrong for having them. Okay, so basically you
Yeah.
migrated from another city and you also feel anxious sometimes. Okay.
So
Okay.
here's my thought on this. So one of the things that is really helpful for me when it comes to this is the way you and I function is the questioning like attitude, but the base layer of all of that has to come from compassion and a willingness and want to understand, not to judge, not to anything else. If she's feeling anxious, understand why, and like actually understand. Sometimes it's going to be difficult, especially if you're a very logical person, to try to figure out why this is actually happening. Sometimes she may not know, sometimes may not be able to explain it, and in those situations just be there and be her shield
Mhm.
so that she understands that you guys are both in this together, and that no matter what she's feeling in this moment, it may last a minute, it may last 5 minutes, um, it may last a lot longer, but at some point, your calmness will co regulate with her and it will drift away. Whether that's
Mhm.
maybe you sit down and hold hands and try to meditate, or she sits on your lap and hugs you, or you hug each other. However, like I don't know what your comfort level is and stuff like that culturally with some of those things, but um, when that sky is falling for her, step in and here is your shield,
Yeah.
my dear,
Yes.
and be
Hold
able
her.
to,
Hmm.
whether that's physically or emotionally, communicate what it is that's going on and why she avoided intimacy. Is that what?
Intimacy. I
Yeah.
think I think that I think you mean, so she has a history of anxiety
It,
and you feel anxious sometimes too, and she's not logical. Yeah, so humans in general are emotional beings. Some of us tend more towards logic than others, but there are so many ways humans are illogical. And so I'd say the first and primary thing is to work on your own anxiety. When you're anxious, can you face that anxiety head on, or do you try to avoid it? Can you do you try to make it go away, or can you just relax and be like and sit with the feeling of anxiety and allow yourself to fully feel the anxiety? It's hard, you know? So that's your first step. Face the anxiety head on like a warrior going into battle. Bring it on.
I'm not sure
Whatever
what that
happens,
means.
I'm
I
okay.
make
You
myself
make
busy.
yourself
I don't have
busy.
a,
Okay.
oh, busy. Okay.
So you're making yourself busy and you're exercising. So exercising is really great at a biological level to help to release endorphins, which can help to counteract anxiety. However, when you're making yourself busy, or you go to exercise as a distraction, then it's not as helpful. So even if you choose to exercise to combat the anxiety on a physical level, face the feeling head on. Allow yourself to feel the anxiety and go exercise and still allow yourself to fully feel the exercise and the anxiety.
Yeah,
So that's
there's
very
a
important because if you're comfortable feeling high levels of anxiety and that doesn't shake you off your center where you get disturbed, hey, that's the point. Don't getting to a point where you're feeling high levels of anxiety or even fear and terror and not being disturbed by it, being able to still be centered and at peace. Like, wow, that is so much anxiety in me right now. Huh. This is really a very, very high anxiety response. How intriguing. I wonder
and
what's
part of it
causing this much.
the part of it that's key in that is that being thrown off your center could look like overreacting to something that's happening with your kids or something like something else where you have a an unreasonable and like judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
temperamental, something like that response to something that's going on. Because it's one thing to just sit in it and feel it and like allow yourself to process everything. And then if something else comes in that throws that curveball, how do you respond? Do you remain calm and not let this inner turmoil come out um and influence what's going on externally, whether it's a child or your wife or whatever? That's one of those key pieces to remaining centered and feeling the anxiety, but not letting it out towards other people, especially.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I want to make a distinction. Um, when I say like actually being at peace and feeling calm, I'm talking about your internal experience. And so, yes, what you're talking about are signs that you're not centered and at peace. But I want to make the distinction that what matters here is what's happening inside. And so, even if you're forcing yourself not to act badly towards others, but inside you're not feeling calm and at peace, you're just faking stoicism. That can sometimes be a good first step. Fake it till you make it, but that's not what we're talking about. What's most important is having that sense of calm and peace inside. Yeah, sometimes calm, but rarely react. Okay. So yeah, practice, do your mindfulness practices, which includes meditation, deep breathing, body scan meditations.
Perhaps
There's
prayer. I don't know
Yes,
what something
yes,
like that.
prayer can be helpful. If you need help identifying what practices can help you, reach out to me. But that's a good place to start. Make sure you're doing practices that help you be centered and calm. And then when your wife is in that place of anxiety, literally imagine that you're getting help and support from something else, right? So when I say, let's say I'm having a difficult time, but I need to be there for my son because, bless you, bud, because he's having a rough day, I will literally imagine like the air around me where I can like soak in peace and calm, right? I can soak in the energy that I need, and I'll imagine that all around me and going through my body, and then I will hold him with this strength. And so use your imagination if you have to, if you're having trouble accessing it within yourself. So you're offering your morning prayer right now. Yeah, prayer is absolutely helpful for finding that. And when you can connect with however you're praying, like whoever you're praying to for your religion, when you can actually connect spiritually with that, then that helps to open up and allow things to flow out of you and keep that sense of peace and calm. So yeah, working on it yourself first, and then when your wife is feeling anxiety, being that strong pillar, holding her, or if you're not in a place where it's appropriate to actually hold her, then being next to her, just virtually creating the body language of like, you are under my protection, and doing what you can to take things, like to be her shield, right? So if the kids are trying to come up to her, maybe at that point you handle it. If somebody else, if something needs to get done, maybe you step in a moment and handle it, but being that shield for her. And then co-regulating, breathe with her. That's super important. Okay, so if you have the privacy where you can hold her, you do the breathing, and she'll probably naturally start to match your breath. So doing that breathing sound, I do that with my son and he automatically starts doing it. So literally do it for yourself, and you can prompt her, breathe with me. Slow it down, right? And so if you can be that shield for her, and you can, thank you, buddy, and you can breathe with her, that should start to regulate her nervous system and bring her down. Okay, if she is in a place where she can't be touched, then just be there physically. Just be this pillar that she can count on. Don't be unpredictable. Don't push. Just be there and allow her to be and witness her, whatever state she's in, without being disturbed by her anxiety.
And for the other part, I think that especially if touch isn't specifically something that's okay, even being in very close proximity face to face and maintaining some really deep, solid eye contact can also be helpful. Being like, hey, I got you. And you just connect eyeballs to eyeballs and being able to kind of provide that. And the other part I wanted to go back to, he's probably going to have to watch this at the end. It sounds like he may have to go. But if she's not logical and it's a big struggle, she's probably not going to be able to do much in terms of expressing how or why. She doesn't do. Okay, well, maybe that's something that you guys could work on together privately for short bursts of time and see how that develops. If not, if it really, really is causing more anxiety, then maybe that's not the method. But in general, I mean, Nicole and I find that deep eye contact is connecting very well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that it could be, this isn't an all encompassing kind of like statement, but if she's not used to expressing, it is definitely going to be difficult at the start. But creating that environment where she isn't going to feel like she's going to be judged or there's not going to be a negative consequence in any way, shape, or form from her trying to share, baby steps. Give her the space and the opportunity to be able to communicate. Even maybe she tells you what she's feeling in her body, like what tension or where. If she feels like her pulse is racing, anything that can help her share with you something that you can then use as like additional armor for that to create the baby steps to get to something bigger. It may not look the same way right off the bat, but baby steps can certainly help.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your question. And I'll say again, bring the question to your wife. Ask her what makes her feel loved. Ask her what makes her feel like she is in good hands. Like, ask her what makes you feel like everything's going to be okay.
Yep. And then no judging, no everything else. Receive it, process it, ask questions from a compassionate place, and not trying to logic her out of that position, because that will never work.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, this little guy is ready for bed. Thank you, everyone who popped in, and we'll be on again next week. If you have more questions, put them in the comments. We're happy to answer. Thank you, Asim, for your question. Thank you for sharing it vulnerably. And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to us. And it's always a pleasure talking to you, Casey.
Of course.
All right.
Good night.
Good night, Facebook.
Night.